So most people won't know that there's this wickedly brilliant effort in the legislature right now to pass what's called Assembly Bill 1955. In the language of the Capitol, we call that AB, Assembly Bill 1955. And the bill originally started out as just a sort of a generic student health measure. But at the last minute, it became something quite different. And that big difference is that it's now a bill that would ban what's called parent notification. So what's parent notification? That's the idea that has always prevailed in California schools, that if you have children doing things at school, their parents have a right to know what those things are. So if anybody out there has had kids in a public school, they're accustomed to having signed off on field trip letters, permission to go play a sport or see a movie or something like that. This bill would say, yeah, those things still apply, but there's one new area where parents cannot know what their child is up to, and that's their gender identity. So it creates a gigantic loophole in what parents are allowed to know about their children's activities, and that's their sexuality. It's a very strange notion to a lot of people, but it would absolutely immediately suspend, prohibit any of the parent notification policies currently in place throughout the state of California, and which have governed California since the time the schools were started in 1850. The idea has always been that parents have absolute authority over their children. Under this bill, no more. Now, the logic behind the bill, if you ask its author, is that parents constitute the greatest threat, the greatest physical, psychological threat to their children imaginable. This is not a new idea. This is also a very old idea. This is the idea that the government knows best. This is, something that is really revealed in places like the former Soviet Union or China or North Korea, anywhere where the government's hegemony, its total control over people, is more important than the family. In the United States, we've always said parents, the family, are the primary keepers of children. So you might ask yourself, how does a bill like this even make it through the state legislature at all? And that requires an understanding of something that's somewhat unique to California. Not entirely unique, but pretty unique to California. It's called gut and amend. It means literally to gut a bill that is moving through the legislature, to stop it, pull everything out of it, and to substitute in entirely new language in order to get through the legislative process under the deadline and without anybody knowing what's really inside the bill. It's a camouflage effort. So in this case, as I mentioned a moment ago, you've got the bill one bill moving through that is supposed to provide for student health in our public schools, and then suddenly it becomes something entirely different, and it's about eliminating a parent's right to know what their child is up to at school. And it even endorses such things as lying to parents about what's going on with their child. It requires that. It requires the creation of separate files that parents are not allowed to see about their child's activity so far as it pertains to the child's gender identity. So this bill is remarkable, and I think most people would probably understand that on immediate reading of the bill. But the fact is, most legislators don't even know that this is what's going on. And it's because this bill was just submitted, and we're now in the middle of the final weeks where lawmakers have to move through hundreds and hundreds of bills in very quick order in order to know how they're going to vote on each bill. Well, the fact is, they can't read hundreds and hundreds of bills. This is like being asked to sign mortgage documents for 100 properties in a week. Can't be done if you've ever signed a mortgage document. So it's a very complex system that has been reduced to pure idiocy, in which people find themselves voting for or against things they don't even read. Now, most of this comes back to haunt lawmakers a few years later down the road, when in fact you discover that the bill they never read has pretty dire consequences for people out here in California who aren't privy to what's going on in Sacramento. And at that point, what typically happens is the public becomes enraged, wants to know who they can blame, and every single lawmaker who voted for that terrible law says, I didn't know, because I didn't read the bill before I voted on it. Now that seems like a pretty lame excuse to you and me, but this is how the prevailing culture works up in Sacramento. Well, a lot of people wonder if the bill will pass. I think there's good reason to suspect that it might pass because it's very difficult to get lawmakers' attention right now in this period of the legislative cycle. They're all just, as I say, trying to go through hundreds of bills. So let's say it passes. What would happen, I think, next is that parents all over the state would suddenly find out about this, would swarm their local school district meetings, and ask, why are you guys doing this? Why are you lying to parents about their children's gender identity? Why are you making up phony files? Why won't you let me see what's in this file that you're keeping on my child? And everybody on the school board will probably say, hey, don't blame us. This came from Sacramento. And all the folks up in Sacramento will say, I had nothing to do with it, or I voted for it, but I didn't know. So what it would really do is those kinds of things that I just mentioned. It would require the creation of separate files that are secret files. It would require teachers to lie to parents about their students' activities at school. Now, one federal judge down in San Diego County has already said, you can't do these kinds of things. These laws are illegal on their face. They violate thousands of years of culture, not just in the West, but all over the world. I mean, you could look at Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. The hegemony, the sovereignty of parents over their children has been unquestioned until, I don't know, the last few years here in California. So it violates, this federal judge said, it violates hundreds of thousands of years of tradition, but it creates specifically 3 harms. He called it a trifecta of harms. First, it harms a child who at this moment of sort of exploring and discovering their sexuality is suddenly told your parents are dangerous and they can't know. So it separates the child from their family at a critical period in their development. So it harms the child. It harms the family because it interferes with, it injures their capacity to govern their child's growing up, their child's maturity. But it also hurts teachers who are being forced to lie to parents about the existence of these files, to say nothing to parents about an issue which they may believe the parents need to know. It injures the relationship of the teacher with the child. They are keeping a secret with the child. Now, one of the things that I would ask people to consider is that all of this thinking in this bill lies on a bedrock of the notion that families are a dangerous institution, that the family itself hinders the government in carrying out the duties that it thinks it knows best about the future of our society. So in supplanting parental authority with government authority, it accomplishes this terrible thing, which is to really divorce children from their parents, divorce parents from their children, to divorce teachers from the parents and the students at a really critical time. And what happens in these situations where you have secrecy between adults, some of whom are teachers or staff workers at a school, cultivating secrecy between adults and children, when those are not their children, is a very dangerous game. California school districts, the state of California, have handed out hundreds of millions of dollars in cases in which teachers or other staff members at schools have raped, sexually assaulted children, students. And what's the first thing that a pederast says to a child? This is our secret, they say. Don't tell anybody. This is just between us. That's the kind of environment that this law purposely creates, a culture of secrecy between some adult teachers and some children. So the cost in pure dollars to the state ultimately will be in the hundreds of millions of dollars because parents will discover this, teachers, some bad teachers. Believe me, it's a small minority, but it has a tremendous impact. We can go through the data about how often teachers are caught and sued and sent to prison, and the district has to pick up the taxpayer, with taxpayer dollars, has to pay this off to the injured parties. So this cult of secrecy around child sexuality and the government is one that I think most people would be very, very wary of. And the next thing that'll happen is there will be a movement either to repeal it through the referendum and initiative process. That's where things show up on a statewide ballot initiative to repeal a law or to advance a law. It's also, I think, just as likely that the next legislative session would get back in, and one of the first things they take up is a repeal or an amend to fix the obvious deficiencies in this law. I think fixing deficiencies in this law starts with simply eliminating, repealing the entire law. There is no silver lining here in this law.
If you haven't checked out CaliforniaInsider.com, we highly recommend you do that now, because we're going to have a lot of news and videos there. And on top of what we have there right now, we're building a really big platform to cover what's happening in California, so you can be informed. We're going to have more shows, more videos from all aspects of life in California. Go to CaliforniaInsider.com and we'll see you there.